So how often have you heard it said, we live in interesting times? Kind of reminds me of that ancient Oriental curse, may you live in interesting times. But we do live in times that are both extremely difficult and deeply rewarding. The poverty, the economic depression, the environmental problems all speak to some of these difficulties. The rewarding times continue to be those moments where our lives become enriched by the love and goodness of others. The problem is that for some families, they seem to be experiencing a greater abundance of one end of the spectrum than the other. And I'm sure you know of such families. Well, as you already know, we are in the midst of a tumultuous time leading up to the 2012 presidential elections next November. We are being bombarded by super PAC infomercials, attacking one candidate and exonerating another. As I experience these highly charged messages, I try to remind myself of an important line from this week's Torah portion. This Torah portion called Terumah. Of course, knowing that I would be delivering this Devar Torah this evening, it is natural that my thoughts would move in this direction anyway. But as I watched these attack ads, this one verse from this week's portion kept coming to mind. V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. This is usually translated as, make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell in their midst. Now, the translation I like best states, make me a sanctuary so that I might dwell within them. Besides being one of the more quotable moments in the Torah, this verse began to take on added meaning as to try to explore and evaluate the various and desperate solutions to our country's hardship that our candidates on both sides of the aisles are promoting to bring about economic, health care, and education recovery for our country. One quote comes to mind from President Obama in his address before Congress around this time in 2009. He said, quote, "The weight of this crisis will not determine the destiny of our nation." The weight of this crisis will not determine the destiny of our nation. Imagine, although we are deeply mired in debt, despondency, even hopelessness, this crisis will not be the way we will define our destiny. It will be through the work of our hands, joining together across the country, linked by that common bond that is the very foundation of the American dream. In this week's Torah portion, Moses is commanded to instruct the Israelites to bring a terumah, an offering, a gift of gold, silver, copper, special leathers, or other precious and semi-precious materials so that the sanctuary, the dwelling place for God, can be built. Well, when the great medieval rabbi Rashi and other rabbis of old read this, they determined that the Torah was referring to two types of offerings or gifts. The first is what we call tzedakah, those acts we are commanded to do that any righteous person should do to be a responsible member of society. Then there are those gifts which are called terumot, voluntary gifts which come not by command or instruction, but from the fullness of the heart. It is these gifts that the Israelites brought in such abundance that Moses was forced to say, "Enough, we have all that we need." It was the echo of this statement that continues to resonate within my mind as I reflect on the 2009 address to Congress. Laws since have been passed, and more will certainly follow, that force us as individuals, as businesses, and as communities to comply with specific measures of congressional law. That's what we would call tzedakah. But it doesn't end there. The revitalization of the American dream cannot be built on the foundation of laws and ordinances alone. There must be a shared sense that the dream, the American dream, is real and that each of us has a part to play in the recovery. It was during this congressional address that President Obama mentioned the story of Leonard Abbas, and my heart jumped. Not from fear that anti-Semitism engenders, but from a sense of Jewish pride. We all know the story of the Jewish banker and investor Bernie Madoff and the allegations of Madoff's robbing from the poor and the wealthy in order to make himself rich. Well, this scandal has played directly into the stereotypical image of the money-grubbing Jew. It was and it continues to be a shanda, a disgrace, and it played into the hands of those who hate not only Jews, but everything else in America. But that's not where the president went when talking about the responsibilities of the banking industry. You may recall, here was the story that said there are moral and responsible banking CEOs who take a responsible position in the midst of this tumultuous time. As the president told the story, he said, "I think about Leonard Abbas, the bank president from Miami who reportedly cashed out of his company, took a $60 million bonus, and gave it to all 399 people who worked for him, plus another 72 who used to work for him. He didn't tell anyone, but when the local newspaper found out, he simply said, 'I knew some of these people since I was 7 years old. I didn't feel right getting the money just for myself.'" Well, each of us has our own unique gifts that we bring to this sacred task, the task of rebuilding America. That's what this week's Torah portion is all about. It demonstrates to us that we can unite to make this country a place where God can dwell in our midst. Truth be told, God continues to dwell within us as individuals and as a society, even in the midst of a crisis. But when our lives become so overburdened that we lose hope, when we forget about the dream, then we lose the ability to recognize God's presence. We are emotionally numb and blind. V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. May we join together in making our country a better place for even the least among us. Then America will truly prosper, and then surely we will know that God does, in fact, dwell within each one of us. Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos.